Alrighty, so we are going to now take a look at the leadership positions briefly in both the House and the Senate. I'm going to start with the positions that are different, so that do not only exist in either the House or in the Senate. So the leadership different positions, which are on the right side of the chart. So there are three primary positions that are different in the House and the Senate. So the first is only the House has a Speaker of the House. The Speaker of the House is third in line to become president. They have a great deal of power over the legislative agenda because they control the floor debate and they assign bills to committee. In the Senate, the official head of the Senate is the vice president. But really, the vice president currently never resides over the Senate and will only go to the Senate in the case of a tie, because we have 100 senators. So if there is a tie, the vice president would be in charge of breaking that tie. The kind of then the figurehead of the Senate, since the vice president is usually not there, is the president pro tempore. That person is fourth in line to become president after the Speaker of the House. Again, it's really more, they are to preside over the Senate in the absence of the vice president. It's usually a senior member of the majority party that is chosen, and it's more of a ceremonial thing. The president pro tempore doesn't really control the legislative agenda. That is more left up to the majority leaders. So let's go over to leadership where the same position exists. So in both the House and Senate, there is a majority leader and minority leader. All right, our current majority leader in the Senate is Mitch McConnell. After Nancy Pelosi as Speaker of the House, it's the majority leader that helps control that legislative agenda. So this basically helps put the party that they represent, their plan, into the legislative program. In the House or in the Senate, the Senate Majority Leader is the most influential person in the Senate and creates the calendar and decides what will go forward for votes. So the minority leader in either the House or the Senate is the person who organizes opposition to the majority party in either the House or the Senate, and really keeps the minority agenda somewhat intact within committee and then on the floor. And there's the Senate Minority Leader. All right, whips then, majority and minority whips. And again, these occur in both the Senate and the House. So the majority whip is whoever is the party that has the most people in power. The minority whip is whoever is in power that does not have as many people as the majority. Basically, they're in charge of letting their members know when votes will occur. They try to direct their members on how to vote on certain bills, and they pressure members to vote with the party. They also kind of keep track of the votes, and they're really important because oftentimes the Speaker of the House or the Senate Majority Leader isn't going to bring something to the floor for a vote until they know that they have all the votes there. And the whip is in charge of helping to count those votes. And there's the rest of our leadership. All right, two other differences between the House and the Senate. So in the House, there is a Rules Committee, and that committee is basically the committee that sets the calendar. It sets the rules of debate for each bill and has control over the policy agenda in the House. The Rules Committee in the Senate does not have this much power. Although there is a Rules Committee, it's really left up to the Senate Majority Leader to determine the calendar and the rules of debate. But in the House, it's and the Speaker of the House is obviously very influential within this committee. Secondly, the filibuster in the Senate. This is when you have an unlimited debate in an attempt to stall action on a bill. Senate rules leave debate almost unrestricted, so that is why you can have unlimited debate. And in order to end the debate and allow the bill to move forward, you have to have cloture. So that means you have to have 60 senators who vote to end the debate. If you don't have 60 senators, then that filibuster can go on, and the bill will never make it to a vote. Many Southern senators during the Civil Rights Movement used the filibuster as a way to try to prevent different civil rights legislation from going through. Okay, so for this section of the notes, I am going to have, which is on congressional committees, I'm going to have some help from Grace and Addie. So, the different types of committees. The very first one we have is a standing committee. So, girls, what are you going to do to help them remember that?
Handstands.
Okay, so a standing committee is a permanent committee in either the House or the Senate. So don't write handstand on your sheet, just write standing committees. And what their job is to deal with specific policy matters. So like there's an armed services committee. There is a judiciary committee. Woo! Ooh, lost control of our handstand there. So those are some of examples of standing committees. Girls are going to demonstrate a joint committee, which basically means the House and the Senate work together on a committee. So a joint committee is typically a permanent committee, and it is made up of members that deal with both houses, and they deal with routine matters. Like there's a joint committee on taxation. Okay, so we have two kinds of committees left. A select committee is a temporary committee formed for a specific purpose. So like the committee to investigate the Benghazi incident. And then the last type of committee, which happens every time that two different versions of a bill are passed, is a conference committee. As you can see, Grace and Addie currently are having a conference committee. Gus is just making a cameo. All right, so a conference committee is a temporary committee with members from both houses that is created to resolve differences in the House and Senate versions of a bill. So they have to have conversations and iron out those differences. Most recently, you saw that happening with like the stimulus bill going through with COVID-19. Okay, the last couple of things we have to talk about then in the Congress review are, first of all, the roles of congressmen, so the different responsibilities that they have. The first three are pretty straightforward, and then the different models in which they represent a group at the bottom we'll talk about a little bit further. So policymaker is just that they write and pass legislation. That's the primary way they accomplish that role. Constituent services, that is the casework that they do for the people which they serve. So for example, if you want to go to a prestigious military academy, oftentimes you have to get a letter signed by your representative and senator. Or if you are going to Washington, D.C., and you would like a tour of the Capitol, oftentimes you can contact your representative. Committee member work, that is where all the oversight work takes place. They partake in drafting legislation, reviewing legislation, and remember that most of the bill-making process takes place in committee, and that's where most bills die. Finally, then, I'm going to let Grace and Addie help explain the models that they take on as a representative, whether it's delegate, trustee, or the very last one, which I will explain, is that they are a party member, and so oftentimes the way that they will vote is the way that the party wants, because they help to try to accomplish the party agenda. But now I'll let Addie and Grace explain delegate versus trustee. When it comes to the role of a congressman or woman as representative, there are different models that people can follow. So there's the delegate model. So Addie, can you demonstrate the delegate model?
I vote the way my constituents want.
And then there's the trustee model. Grace?
I vote on my ideas and what's best for the country.
Sometimes these two models can come into conflict. Okay, I feel like most of this chart is pretty self-explanatory. You can also always go back and watch the video, How a Bill Becomes a Law. But a couple of things to note on the edges of this chart. So first off, you want to make sure you know that you have to be a lawmaker in order to propose a bill. Or now, most lawmakers don't actually write the bills themselves. They have committee members, lobbyists oftentimes write bills, and members of the executive branch can contribute to the bill writing process, as well as interest groups. But a bill actually has to be introduced by a member of Congress. It's then assigned to committee and usually subcommittee. Again, it's most important to note that whether you're in the House or the Senate, most of the work of Congress is done in committee, and most bills do not make it out of committee. Once in the House, it does have to go through the Rules Committee before it goes on to debate on the floor. In the Senate, it does not have to go through a Rules Committee. However, it's really the majority leader who puts it on the calendar, right? If the House and Senate pass two different versions of the bill, there oftentimes is a formal conference committee created to iron out the differences. And then it has to be returned to both the House and the Senate to be voted on before it can go to the president. All right. As far as other vocab, the budget process we're going to talk about a little bit later. Key other vocabulary, you have to know log rolling, pork barrel legislation, and earmarks. Those are probably the most important terms that I didn't include within the review. The reapportionment, quorum, that kind of stuff is included in the discussion. Also, party caucus. A party caucus is the group, like the members of the Democratic Party that are in the House make up the party caucus. So it can be about the political party you're a part of, or there's like the women's caucus or the other minority caucuses in Congress that just like a group that work for common goals. So just make sure you know those words as well.